Welcome back to the deep dive. I am genuinely excited to get into this today because we are doing something a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Usually you're taking this massive stack of articles or, a huge report and trying to condense it down for you. But today, the source material is tiny.
It really is.
It's literally 4 verses long. We're looking at Psalm 123.
Yeah.
But, and this is a big but, the commentary we have around these 4 verses describes it as having a density that is honestly kind of shocking.
It's been called a masterclass in emotional survival.
Exactly.
It really is a classic case of big things coming in small packages. And for a text that's thousands of years old, it addresses a psychological state that feels incredibly relevant right now.
It does. It touches on something we all feel but don't always know how to articulate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we picked it. Because even though it's ancient, the core theme isn't just prayer in a generic sense. It's how to deal with the specific feeling of being looked down on, contempt.
Scorn. That feeling when you walk into a room or, log onto a platform and you just know people are rolling their eyes at you.
Yes, that's the one.
That is the specific frequency this text operates on. So the mission for this deep dive is to extract the strategy that's sort of hidden in this poem. The sources frame it as a guide for maintaining internal stability when your external environment is hostile.
So when the world looks down on you,
How do you look up?
I love that framing.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene before we get into the text itself. This is one of the songs of degrees or songs of ascents, right?
Correct. It's part of a specific playlist, essentially. Psalms 120 through 134 were sung by pilgrims traveling uphill to Jerusalem for the annual festivals.
Okay, so you have to picture the setting. Crowds, travel, anticipation.
Looking forward to a party. And usually these songs are really upbeat. They're about unity or protection or the joy of just arriving.
It's like a road trip soundtrack. You want high energy. You want life is a highway, not something depressing.
Right. But then you hit Song 123, and the mood just shifts dramatically. The research points out that this psalm really stands out because it's not celebrating, it's groaning. It introduces this note of real tension into the journey. It suggests that some of these pilgrims weren't just tired from walking, they were exhausted from being mocked.
Which is such a realistic detail. I mean, you don't leave your problems behind just because you're going on some spiritual journey.
Exactly. So let's look at how the writer handles this. Verse 1 opens with a very specific physical action. It says, "Unto thee lift I up mine eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens."
On the surface, I look up to God. Sounds like, standard religious language. But the commentary suggests there's a lot more physics happening here.
There is. It's about the geometry of attention. The source material emphasizes that this isn't a casual glance. It's an intentional, almost forceful shift of focus. You have to understand the human instinct here.
Okay.
If you're being mocked, if you're in a room with people who despise you, where do your eyes naturally go?
To the threat immediately. If someone is whispering about me in the corner, I'm laser focused on them. I'm trying to read their body language, trying to hear what they're saying.
It's a defense mechanism.
Right, I need to know what they're plotting.
Precisely. It's a survival instinct. We stare at the thing we fear because we want to manage it. But the psalmist does something completely counterintuitive here.
He looks away.
He deliberately breaks eye contact with the threat. He refuses to give the mockers his attention. Instead, he fixes his eyes on thou that dwellest in the heavens.
So it's an act of defiance, in a way, like refusing to give them the satisfaction.
It's more than defiance, it's an act of recalibration. One of the key insights from the notes is this phrase: perspective determines endurance.
Do that again.
Perspective determines endurance. If you stare at the people mocking you, they look huge and you feel small. You feel outnumbered.
Right.
But if you stare at the one enthroned in the heavens, suddenly the mockers look, well, tiny. It's about choosing which reality you are going to let define your emotional state.
That is a massive takeaway right there. Perspective determines endurance. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about choosing which reality is the primary one.
Exactly. And that visual focus sets up the metaphor in verse 2, which I think is the most complex part of the text for a modern listener to digest.
Oh, absolutely. I was reading through the notes and thinking, okay, this is going to be a hard sell for a modern audience. Let me read it so everyone knows what we're talking about.
Please.
Behold, as the eyes of servants look unto the hand of their masters, so our eyes wait upon the Lord our God. We have to talk about the servant language. In our culture, being a servant or looking to a master it's the opposite of what we aspire to.
It is. We want autonomy. We want to be the boss.
This sounds passive, weak even.
It definitely clashes with our modern sensibilities. We hear master and servant, and we think of oppression or mindless obedience. But the sources urge us to look at this through the lens of the ancient Near East to get the actual insight. They argue this isn't a posture of cowering fear.
It's not.
It's a posture of alert dependence.
Alert dependence. Okay, that's a really interesting phrase. Break that down for me.
Think about a highly trained assistant to a surgeon, or maybe a musician watching a conductor. The text focuses on the eyes looking to the hand.
The hand, specifically.
Right. In that context, the master didn't shout orders. They gave subtle hand signals. A flick of the wrist might mean bring food, or stop, or protect this guest.
So if you're the servant in this scenario, you have to be hyper-focused. You can't be scrolling on your phone or daydreaming.
Exactly. You have to be dialed in. If you look away for a second, you miss the cue. So the metaphor isn't about a beaten-down slave. It's about a team member who is completely attuned to the leader. It implies a high level of intimacy and trust.
You're watching the hand because you expect it to move. You expect provision. You expect guidance.
Yes. That shifts the vibe completely. It's not, I'm helpless and waiting for a handout. It's, I'm ready to move, but I need the signal. And here is where the deep dive comparison gets really interesting. The notes contrast this waiting on the hand with our modern default, which is grabbing the wheel.
Oh, I am definitely a wheel grabber.
Yeah.
If I feel contempt or injustice, my knee-jerk reaction is, I need to fix this. I need to explain myself. I need to clap back right now.
We all are. We value self-sufficiency above almost everything else. But the insight here is that when you're dealing with deep scorn, self-sufficiency often leads to exhaustion. You just burn out trying to manage everyone's opinion of you.
That's so true.
So the psalmist is trading that exhaustion for what the sources call disciplined trust. He's saying, I am not going to react to the mockers until I get the signal from Rod.
That requires so much self-control, it's actually harder than fighting back. Waiting is active.
It is. Waiting is not weakness is another key takeaway here. It's a strategic pause. It's refusing to let the enemy dictate your timing. You are operating on a different clock.
Okay, so we have the upward gaze in verse 1 and this attentive waiting in verse 2. But then we hit the reality of the situation in verses 3 and 4. And this is where the text gets raw.
It really does.
Verse 3 says, Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt. First, that repetition, have mercy, have mercy.
That's desperation.
Right, and mercy. If someone is mocking me, I usually want justice. I want them to get in trouble.
That is such a profound distinction. You're right. Usually when we're wronged, we go to the courtroom of our minds and we demand fairness. God, look at what they did. Punish them.
But he doesn't ask for justice here. He asks for mercy or grace. Why do you think that is?
The sources suggest a couple of things. First, it acknowledges that relief comes from God's character, not the victim's merit. He isn't saying, save me because I'm perfect. He's saying, save me because you are gracious. But secondly, and I think this is key, asking for mercy changes your own heart. It softens you. If you demand justice, you stay angry. You stay in the fight. If you ask for mercy for yourself, you're placing yourself in a position of receiving care rather than demanding rights.
It de-escalates the internal conflict.
Exactly. It moves you from a plaintiff to a child asking for help. It changes the dynamic entirely.
And then the reason he needs help. We are exceedingly filled with contempt. That phrasing is so vivid. Filled.
It sounds like they've been force-fed. The Hebrew implication there is about saturation, being glutted or sated. Imagine you've eaten a massive meal and you just cannot take one more bite. That's how they feel about the mockery.
They have had it up to here, drowning in it.
It paints a picture of a hostile environment that is inescapable. It's not just one rude comment, it's an atmosphere.
And verse 4 tells us who is creating this atmosphere. It says, Our soul is exceedingly filled with the scorning of those that are at ease and with the contempt of the proud.
Those that are at ease.
That is such a specific, cutting description.
It really is. It's not the violent, it's not the warriors, it's the at ease. This describes the arrogance of comfort. The sources link this to a socioeconomic dynamic. These are people who are secure, wealthy, perhaps powerful, who feel untouchable.
And from that high tower of comfort, they look down on the struggle of the faithful pilgrims.
It's the sneer of the successful.
It's that attitude of, why are you stressing about religion? Why are you living by those old rules? Look at us, we're fine, and we don't do any of that.
Precisely. It's a specific kind of cruelty that comes from unexamined privilege. They aren't trying to kill the pilgrims, they're just dismissing them as irrelevant or foolish. And the text notes that this scorning is what fills the soul with pain.
Being dismissed is sometimes harder to bear than being attacked.
Because being attacked at least means you're a threat. Being dismissed means you're nothing.
Wow.
And this brings us to the most surprising part of the psalm, the ending. Or, well, the lack of an ending.
What do you mean?
Look at the text. He asks for mercy. He describes the problem, the contempt of the proud. And then the psalm ends.
And then...
That's it. There is no lightning bolt. There is no line that says, and then the Lord destroyed them. There's no resolution in the text.
You're right. It just stops. We are filled with the contempt of the proud. End of scene. That feels unresolved.
It feels like a cliffhanger, and that is the brilliance of it. The sources argue this is a counter pattern to how we usually operate. We want the Hollywood ending where the bad guys lose and we walk away in slow motion.
Of course.
This psalm offers a different kind of resolution. The resolution of relationship. The problem, the mockers, hasn't changed. They're still there, they're still proud. But the pilgrim has successfully shifted his focus.
So the victory isn't that the bullying stopped?
No.
The victory is that the bullying didn't break his focus on God.
Bingo. That is the definition of spiritual resilience. It's not the absence of the storm, it's the ability to keep your eyes on the compass while the storm is raging.
Okay, I want to pivot here.
Yeah.
Because while the history is fascinating and I love the imagery, our listeners aren't ancient pilgrims dodging wealthy hecklers on the dusty road to Jerusalem.
Right. We're dealing with modern life.
How do we bridge this gap? The notes mention modern application in relation to social media. Let's talk about that.
It's the most direct parallel. The source material explicitly connects this saturation of contempt to the digital age. If you want to feel exceedingly filled with scorning, just open any major social media app or read the comments section.
Oh yeah, we are living in an economy of contempt.
It's true. Algorithms literally prioritize conflict. Disdain engages people more than agreement does.
So using the Psalm 123 strategy, the advice isn't delete the app, though maybe that helps, but it's about where you look.
It's about blocking the noise by tuning the frequency. The actionable advice here is, do not let criticism control your focus. If you read a nasty comment and you spend 3 hours stewing on it, formulating a comeback, stalking the person's profile,
You've looked at the hand of the mocker.
you are now their servant. You are obeying their provocation.
Wow, you are now their servant. That hits hard. If I react to you, I'm serving you. I'm letting you control my emotional state.
Exactly. The only way to break that chain is the verse 1 pivot. You lift your eyes. You say, I see this insult, but I am looking to the master for my value. It's about protecting your peace by aggressively curating your attention.
This also applies so heavily to the workplace, doesn't it? The notes mention hostile environments.
Yes, and this is a common experience. You might be in a corporate culture that is cutthroat or where ethical boundaries are loose, and if you try to stand firm on integrity, you get that at-ease look.
The eye roll, oh, you're such a Boy Scout comment.
Or maybe it's your faith. You decline to participate in certain gossip, or you don't laugh at a certain joke, and suddenly you're the outsider. You feel that social chill.
And the temptation there is just to cave, to fit in so the contempt stops.
And the expert insight from our sources is critical here. Your worth is not measured by public approval. It sounds like a cliche, but Psalm 123 operationalizes it.
How so?
It says, contempt from the office or the school or the culture does not equal rejection from God. You can be mocked by the world and still be held by the master.
Distinguishing between what people say about you and what is true about you. That's the mental battle. But there's a danger here too, right? The sources mention that ridicule can actually damage our character.
Yes. Ridicule is dangerous not just because it hurts our feelings, but because it can harden the heart.
Talk to me about that. How does it harden us?
Well, think about it. If you are constantly poked and prodded, you build a shell. You become cynical. You start mocking them back. You become bitter.
And if you let that happen, the contempt has won.
It has. It has changed you into a smaller, harder version of yourself.
So the goal isn't just to survive the criticism, it's to survive it without becoming bitter. To keep a soft heart in a hard world.
Correct. The phrase to write down is this: strength rooted in pride collapses. Strength rooted in dependence endures. If you try to tough it out with your own ego, I'll show them. You will eventually crack or become just as nasty as they are.
But if your strength is rooted in dependence, God have mercy on us. That is a soft strength that doesn't turn brittle.
That paradox of dependence is strength. It's the opposite of everything we are taught, but it makes so much sense in this context. It shifts the weight off your shoulders.
You don't have to be the judge. You don't have to be the enforcer.
You just have to be the faithful servant.
This brings us to the core of how this strengthens our relationship with God. The prompt for this deep dive specifically asks us to consider that. And I think we're seeing it moves trust from a passive idea to an active survival strategy.
It does. It redefines what waiting on God means. It turns waiting into a discipline. It's not just sitting around. It's an active choice to seek guidance before reacting. It strengthens the relationship because it forces constant communication.
You're constantly checking the hand of the master.
Right.
So we have this ancient text giving us a modern survival guide. To wrap this up, the source material poses 3 really challenging reflection questions. And I think we should just throw these out there for you to catch.
Let's do it. These are diagnostic tools to see where your heart is at.
Question 1. When I feel criticized, where does my focus go first?
And be honest with that one. Does it go inward to self-pity? Poor me. Does it go outward to revenge? I'll get them. Or does it go upward?
That first split-second reaction tells you everything. It's a reflex test. Okay, question 2. Do I react quickly, or do I pause and seek guidance?
That's the servant's eye metaphor again. The pause is holy. The reaction is usually flesh. Can you hold your tongue long enough to check in with the master?
That pause is everything. And the last one. What would change if I asked for mercy instead of demanding fairness?
That is the game changer. Fairness keeps you in the fight. Mercy lifts you above it. It creates a buffer of grace between you and your attackers. It doesn't mean what they did was right. It means you're choosing a higher court of appeals.
It really is a masterclass.
Yeah.
It's only 4 verses, but it completely re-engineers how we process social rejection.
It does. And it reminds us that while we can't control the mockers, we can't stop the proud from being at ease, we have absolute control over where we lift our eyes. And that focus is what determines our peace.
Steady faith begins with steady focus. I think that is the bumper sticker for this episode.
I agree. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Look, we know this is dense stuff, and we want to help you actually apply this, not just nod along. If you want the full breakdown of these points, and maybe those reflection questions sent to your inbox so you don't forget them by tomorrow, join our mailing list.
Yes, please do. We put a lot of work into the takeaways for these so you can actually use them in your week.
You can find that at https://bit.ly practical-advice.
Yes.
That's https://ly.ly practical-advice. Go check it out.
And as always, we don't want to just leave you with information. We want transformation.
Right. So here's the challenge for your week. Next time you feel that sting, that comment, that look, that email that makes you feel small, stop. Don't type back. Don't vent. Ask yourself this question. How will you apply this information in your life?
Don't just look at the problem. Look up.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.